You're now listening to a new episode of Gratitude Through Hard Times. Gratitude instills humility. Gratitude removes the ego. Gratitude helps empower the best in others around you. Our goal is to guide individuals and companies to practice gratitude so you can live a longer, happier, and more successful life. Get ahead of life with connection and purpose. This is Gratitude Through Hard Times with Schembra.
Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another episode of Gratitude Through Hard Times. It's your host, Schembra, and today I'm really excited because fall is in the air, and today we have a repeat guest coming on our podcast. For all the new listeners to this show, I say hello. How are you? It's nice to meet you. I invite you, and I don't know how you got here, but I invite you to go through our podcast episode archives, and you'll see a multi-year commitment to bringing on hundreds of the world's great leaders to share their story of how they've built the companies they've built, and they lead with an attitude of gratitude, generosity, giving, and genuine human connection. We're glad to have you along for the ride, and by the end of this podcast, I'm going to invite you to stay on our journey by clicking that subscribe button and sharing this episode with a friend. To all our loyal listeners of this podcast, I welcome you back with open arms. Friends, you know, the next time you're in New York City, give me a holler. You're welcome to our dinner table anytime you'd like. Some of my favorite moments throughout the week are when you email in your thoughts, your questions, your comments, your concerns of today's episode guest. So keep your comments coming. Folks, we have today with us a repeat offender, as we say. We have Julie Peck. Julie Peck came on our podcast just a few short months ago. And you can find it in the podcast episode archives about 6 or 7 episodes prior. We talked about the gift of the Curvy Path, this ability to look at one's life and say, life ain't linear. There's a lot of different things that happen along the way that may not be the most obvious next step, but it's the steps that she took, and it led her to be in a pretty good position in life. Julie is a very seasoned technology and growth executive with, I won't say how many years, but many years of scaling some of the world's great SaaS, fintech, and compliance intelligence companies. Currently, she's the CEO of Talent Neuron, which is the global leader in workforce intelligence and strategic talent analysis. But she's been the CEO of many great companies, both private equity held companies, independent companies. She's earned spots on the Inc. 5000 list amongst the fastest growing private companies in America. And she has done life her way. If you go back to our previous podcast episode, you will see we had a conversation about gratitude to her mother, which we recorded on the 9-year anniversary passing of her father, Ed. She gave us the full kind of journey through the struggle of the Curvy Path. She shared her transformation moments through 12-step recovery work through 7 years of therapy, or many, many years of therapy. She talked about failing out of college, like me, living in rough apartments, waiting tables, reinventing herself, and eventually going back and finishing her collegiate career in an MBA program. She is truly a high-performing leader. She's organized employee union forces. She's reinvented her career. She wins at all costs, but she does it through an attitude of gratitude and the spirit of generosity. She's a giver, folks. Today, we're going to be talking about self-worth, resilience, stoicism, AI behaviors versus skills. What's happening in the talent market? I think it's timely to bring her on to talk about what you can do to, I don't know, maybe get through your hard times. Maybe you've just been laid off. Maybe you're a CEO who's navigating organizational change. Julie's at the forefront of the labor market and how that is shifting through AI. So we're going to have a lot of those conversations today. So buckle in, get a nice drink, a glass of wine or a cup of coffee, whatever time zone you're in. And let's welcome Julie back to another episode of Gratitude Through Hard Times. Julie, it's good to have you.
Hey, Chris. It's great to be back. So soon, too.
So soon. We're excited. Now, Julie, we usually ask our gratitude question after, at the start. For all the new listeners, we usually ask a very simple question at the start of every podcast. Mm-hmm. If you could give credit or thanks to one person in your life that you don't give enough credit or thanks to, or that you've never thought to thank, who would that be? And I asked you that gratitude question on a very important day, just a few weeks ago. I won't re-ask you the question now, but please briefly share with our listeners who your answer was, why it was so important, and how your life has maybe been filled with more gratitude or less gratitude, or what that sparked ever since.
Yeah, I mean, my answer back then was is the same as it is now, which is my mother. It sounds like what they say is a motherhood and apple pie answer, like I give thanks to my mom and whatever. But the reality is, my mom is a very special human being. She is a very strong woman. She came up in a very challenging family environment, really hard. And in the world of fight or flight, she's a fighter. And she's tough that way. She's 5'3" and tiny Italian woman, that kind of thing. But she's in all of my experiences with her, from the time I was a little baby to now when I'm definitely not young, I've never seen her be anything other than generous with her time, with her efforts, with her resources, to try and help us as her kids or her family or her grandsons or her, nieces or nephews or whatever. And I don't think I've ever heard her sort of say a nasty or snarky or gossipy thing about anyone. That's a very tough standard to live up to, because people have their weak moments, especially at home when you're living with your family, where, you're not so great in this moment or that moment. But she's just always had such a strong and wonderful heart. And I've grown to have such an incredible adult female bond with her. She doesn't really act like my mom anymore. She's not still trying to raise me. But we talk as great peers. I find her to be very wise and experienced, and I can tell her things that have been difficult in my life or even difficult now, and she doesn't judge me. Sometimes she can empathize, and sometimes she just likes to live vicariously through all the crazy things that are going on in my life or my career. So yeah, she's a great woman, a great role model, and an anchor in my life.
Cheers to mama.
Cheers to mom. I told her, actually, after I did the first episode of this podcast with you, I told her about it, and she's like, "Oh, did you mention me?" I'm like, "I did." She goes, "Oh no." No, she hasn't listened to it yet, because I got to figure out how to enable her to go on her iPad and find it and listen to it, but she will. But she was all of a sudden, she's like, "Oh God, what did you say?" I'm like, "No, it's all good. Don't worry."
She sounds like she's from the old guard of life, and she has taught you a lot of things just about living and being human and service and sacrifice, and that fuller story is in part 1 of our podcast from before. But she's done such a great job raising you, and I love hearing about the relationship y'all have now. It's interesting, and it's a great jumping off point. You mentioned the word wise. And to me, that's a word that's missing from our vernacular today, is our ability to have relationships with people that are wise. I think that we live in a world that's not based on wisdom anymore. It's based on instantaneous, short-term, convenient knowledge. We
Yes.
have architected technologies and systems and economies, etc., that reward you to have the right answer quick, or can help you search for the right answer quick through AI, through a chatbot. But that doesn't necessarily help prepare people to be able to zoom out and understand the broad, inconvenient context about life. And that's wisdom. Wisdom comes from experience. Wisdom comes from inconvenience. It comes from sweat equity. It comes from doing something so long that you know it's so deep inside and out. And I think we've lost a lot of that. Can you briefly touch, and I've been having this conversation with my friend Hannah prior, can you briefly touch on your maybe first thought on the idea that we're living through the collapse of a knowledge economy, where people used to be paid and validated and recognized for their ability to know things. And now we're shifting into maybe a wisdom economy where AI knows everything for us now. Agents do everything for us now. What does that leave left? Human beings need to touch into relation, coherence, intimacy, wisdom, the ability to help people discern between right or wrong, good or bad in a plethora of knowledge. And so why is that so important? And does the world need more wise elders to usher us into that new way of being? Do you see that at all? I know I just threw a lot, a big shift at you, but do you see that?
I have so many things in my head right now. I'm going to try and sort it out and be coherent. But the way I see it, and I don't feel like I'm old, just not inside anyway. But I've been around some years, and I remember when MTV first came out in the early '80s. I don't even know if you were alive then, but
Nope.
I
But that's
was.
all right.
I was in high school, and MTV came out, and it has been used for like a couple of decades after that as an example of the beginning of the shortening of people's attention span. This whole like constant feed of music videos that are 3 minutes long, and it wasn't a movie and it wasn't a half-hour TV show. It's these quick flips, and fast forward to now the 2020s. So that was 40 years ago. Oh, wow, 40,
Whoa.
40, oh, almost 45 years ago, maybe something like that. That's crazy. But if you think about like in the last 45 years, the attention span, or the requirement for a steady attention span, has continued to erode over all those years. And so that we all become kind of like these conduits through which a bunch of transactional, instantaneous, momentary things pass. I must think of it like a river, where the water just keeps rushing through the river and making certain things wet and splashing up here and there, but it just keeps moving through, versus a pond where water arrives there and it kind of sits there and it has its own life and ecosystem by being there for a while, right? So this idea of this transactional flow of experiences that are really quick and tiny snapshots, I think it makes it hard to absorb stuff. And absorbing those experiences and drawing connections between one experience and another one in a kind of a quiet time where you can hold the collective experiences that you've had in a place and sort of make sense of it all. I think that is one of the core places that breeds wisdom over time, is that you make these connections and you sit with these experiences and you figure out, maybe sometimes right away and maybe sometimes not for years, what you learned or gained from that, you know, interaction or experience or whatever. And if it all just flows right through you because we're all so fast and we're all so immediate, I don't know whether we have enough to hang on to and hang on to it for long enough for it to really blossom into a like a molecule of wisdom. And I think the world doesn't require it from us as much anymore, because by the time you're like sharing something that you've learned, people have moved on, right? So I think we're living in a highly transactional world right now, where immediacy is the main force. And so something that sounds like a good idea, or let's call it a wise thing to do right here in the moment, may be an incredibly stupid thing to do as it plays out over time. And we're not actually thinking about it in those, you know, in those long term kind of metaphysical ways. We're thinking about everything in a transactional way. And that, I think, is a really good way to start talking about what's happening with AI too. I spend a lot of time digging into the newest and the latest trends evolving with AI and how quickly it's evolving. And I will say that the technical capabilities of AI are evolving far faster than the world's ability to be wise about how we build it and interact with it and apply it. And that is scary. And if it's okay, I'll give you an example of
Absolutely.
how fast this is going. So I have the good fortune of having um, 25 years of data at my disposal on how the world of work has evolved. And we have been harvesting the world's jobs data for 25 years from all over the world, represents about 95% of the world's GDP. And so the good news is then when you have that much data for that long, you actually can start to
Can,
see
can
how
you
things.
put a number on those data? Is that 10 billion data points? What is
Oh,
that? What is
that's a,
that number?
right now it's 33 terabytes of data, but I don't know how. I mean, we still harvest like over a billion data points like a day. So I don't know.
33
I don't know them.
terabytes
Yeah.
of data. I'm going into AI to be able to say, explain that to a 5-year-old. That's me. I went to AI to say, explain that to a 5-year-old. So 33, terabytes of data is like a giant room full of Lego bricks. Okay, that didn't help. It's huge, folks. Folks, it's huge. It's
It's
huge.
huge. It's a lot. It's a lot to store, but it's also a lot to interact with. But my point is that when you have that much data for that long, you have the ability to see how things evolved. I mean, listen, it's how archaeologists figure things out and, that kind of thing. But so the first time, so Gen AI was really the trigger point. Generative AI, like ChatGPT, just for the layman.
Mm-hmm.
Um, AI has been around a long time. Generative AI is the thing that triggered AI capabilities to become mainstream. And it started with there were jobs that appeared on the world stage for the first time called prompt engineers, right? Well, the first two jobs that were ever posted out there in the world that were looking for prompt engineers were in November of 2022.
Mm-hmm.
Before that, there were 0 jobs ever in the history of man that were called prompt engineer, and the first 2 arrived on the scene publicly in November 2022. 6 months later, in May of 2023 or June or something like that, May, I think, there were thousands and thousands of jobs out there, companies looking for prompt engineers as a new job. 6 months after that, you started to see prompt engineering as a skill that was inherently required in a lot of other technical jobs like software engineering and data science and analytics and that kind of thing. So it was considered a technical skill because I think the first set of beliefs was that prompt engineering and ChatGPT or large language models and generative AI was going to be able to help us write code faster, for example. So it started to go from a job to a skill set in a set of jobs. 6 months after that, let's call it present day, prompt engineering is now becoming a required skill for all kinds of jobs, including marketing jobs and sales jobs and uh and everything. So it went from a specialty role that no one ever heard of before to a core skill set that is now going to become required for every single job in every single place that is in a knowledge economy. That is wicked fast, as they say in the Boston area. That is really, really fast way of moving from like this little niche job to now a skill set that's required all over the place. That's how fast it's moving. And because it's become mainstream, you have a lot of people in a lot of functions um, experimenting with generative AI. They're trying to figure out, how do I use it? How do I apply it? How do I govern it? It is a little bit of the wild, wild west. There are also companies like ours, like mine, who are building generative AI into our software platforms to allow users to interact with a large language model and massive amounts of data and interpreting that data in a controlled environment where it isn't, it's going to hallucinate less and things like that. Now we're starting to hear a lot more about agentic AI, which is sort of the next generation. It's basically, and for all of you AI guys out there that are that are writing this all and interacting with LLMs, including the ones that work for me, I'm just trying to make this simple. This is not going to be particularly correct technically because you could go down a rabbit hole and never get out. But let's call an agentic AI or an AI agent, let's call that a pre-established set of really good prompts. So if you go into ChatGPT, you got to write your own prompt. And every time you can write it differently. And depending on how you write it, you're going to maybe get a different response, a different level of richness, and that kind of thing, right? That's what a prompt is. It's basically a dialogue that you start with a ChatGPT or a Claude or something like that. An agent is sort of like a preset set of prompts that are written by people who are really good at getting out the results they want, and they're put together into like, call it like a robot, like a digital robot that can do something for you, and it's predisposed to what it's going to do for you. So this agent, so we have an AI agent that we're building that is like a hiring um, coach that will help recruiters or talent acquisition people do the best possible job at hiring. And they know all the dimensions of what goes into thinking about who do I hire, where do I find the candidates and all that. So, but that agent's job is just to help the talent acquisition person or the staffing person get the best out of the process and fastest and stuff like that. So that agent is very purpose built around the job. And then you have the birth of um, agents whose job it is to manage agents. So, so now my job is, if I'm an agent of an agent, my job is to figure out. I'm like the maestro. I'm like, I have to figure out how to pull the right agent in at the right time for the right role. And so it's literally like starting to evolve like a staff hierarchy where you have individual workers that are doing specific jobs. You have enough of them, now you start to need a manager who can coordinate with that work. Eventually, you're going to need a manager of managers, etc. So now there's this like whole shadow org structure that is going to proliferate. And companies are going to have a combination of real human employees using AI-driven tools that, software tools that have AI in them and all that. It's augmented with AI. And then you're going to have agents that are like digital employees that don't really exist, but they are digital employees who are also doing jobs. So the question is, how are these companies thinking about managing a workforce that is now made up of real people and virtual people or virtual agents that all have to divide and conquer together? They have to collaborate. They have to be accountable for certain things. I mean, we joke sometimes when we're talking about like, well, so these AI agents are going to be like employees. Are they going to have morale problems? You know, do you need to give them a bonus or throw them a party if they do a particularly good job? Is this going to make us colder as employers because we're not only managing humans now, but increasingly managing robots? So that's what's happening now, and I think companies and everybody are trying to figure out like, well, what does the world of work really look like when I now have this combination of people and agents that have to work together? And if you take it another step further, and this is going to be to my earlier point about like our ability to govern this stuff and think about the implications, the ethical and human implications of this is not caught up to the technology. But now you're seeing, and actually last month in September, it was September or maybe October, the first jobs appeared on the scene that had the terms digital twin in them. And as I don't know what it was, digital twinning jobs, I don't know whether it was a skill set. It might have been a skill, not a job. But so it's the next frontier. Digital twins and digital clones are starting to emerge, and those are not just agents. Digital twin is sort of like it's like a it's like a copy of of a of a bunch of things that allows you to do simulations. Like, so if I want to change my manufacturing process in the old world, you'd have to you'd have a flow chart and you'd have to figure out, okay, we're going to change our manufacturing process and we think it's going to speed up production this way and that way and that kind of thing. Because in each component of the beginning to the end of producing something, this will speed up here and that will speed up there, but you're basically trying to imagine it on paper first. A digital twin actually allows you to put all of the different components in place that exist in your manufacturing process, for example, and then run simulations to say, actually, what happens when you change this process or that process or whatever. And that's a very powerful set of things to do. And it's trained on a lot of different kinds of data, et cetera, to be able to be a real world, simulation of that. Digital clones, though, are different. A digital clone is trained on your data. Like, so if I had a digital clone of me, it's going to be trained on how I operate, how I behave, what my personality is like, how I make decisions, what decisions I make, how I weigh options, how my brain thinks or whatever. So think of all the data that's like in my digital world, personal and professional. So it's every email I send, every Teams meeting I'm on, every instant message I send, every phone call I have, every memo I write, every PowerPoint deck I create, every strategy I participate in. It can and increasingly is being recorded and captured. And then in my personal life, we have devices that are listening to us even when they're not on. My phone, I'm pretty sure, is listening to me right now. And I don't know if I'm going to see an ad later somewhere on Instagram or something on digital cloning. I'm sure, because it's listening to me, even though I'm not talking on the phone right now. I interact with Instagram. I post things or read things on Facebook. I search things on Google, or I have chats with ChatGPT, right? So I have a whole digital life. If all of it's captured, it starts to get to understand who I am at my core. and how I operate. And so theoretically, a company could decide to take all of the data from an individual's interactions over time and create a digital clone of that person and have the digital clone start doing that person's job or doing 8 jobs that, you ever hear somebody saying, I wish I had 100 of you because you're awesome. And like, I would put them on everything. Well, theoretically you could. But the question is, who owns that intellectual property? If somebody clones me based on my digital footprint over time, do I own my digital clone? Or does the environment in which I expressed all that own it? Does my company own it? Can they replace me with it? Or I think Elon Musk had said something like, at some point, nobody will need any employees anymore. And I don't know, whatever. I think I don't know what article he said that in or whatever, but somebody mentioned it to me the other day. And I said, I think what he was really referring to, or he might have been referring to, is we have a, we have a generational problem in our workforce right now, in that we have big generations that are retiring and we have smaller generations that are coming up, and there's labor shortages all over the place, and everybody knows there's a big albatross around our collective necks from an economy perspective, social security and all that, in terms of paying for this older generation out of the funds that are coming from a smaller generation. It's just lopsided, and that's what that's what's happening. But there are also not enough people to fill senior jobs and blah blah blah. The thing is, if you know, everybody's wondering, like, at some point, will we ever really be able to retire? Will Social Security or pensions even really be around anymore? Is that not the way the world can operate anymore because we just broke it with asymmetry of generations and that kind of thing? And so theoretically, if you think about it, like, if I owned my digital clone and I could actually spend my time building out an increasingly amazing digital clone, then could I just license it all over the place in perpetuity? And that becomes my annuity stream or my income for life, even after I'm too old to work
Uh,
live.
I
I don't know.
I mean, I literally just had that. I literally just went to ChatGPT as you were talking and said, "What could my digital clone do?"
Hmm.
Right? My digital clone would be trained on the recordings of close to 1,000 keynotes, workshops, gratitude experiences, my
Hmm.
original pasta framework, my inquisitive empathy, thousands of different things that I've invented. It would
Yeah.
be trained on my meetings, my emails, my Google Drive, my Notion document. And it could be a personalized leadership coach for our
Yeah.
clients, right? It could be a culture and connection operating system for companies at scale. It could be a content creation engine. It could be a facilitated conversation guide. It could be, right? Imagine the conversation that I have around the dinner table with 16 people, around helping them connect,
Hmm.
asking them a deep question. Imagine the conversations and the tools that I use to have a 30-minute call in which I just kind of make them, feel the most seen they've ever felt before in their life. Imagine giving that as a tool
Yeah.
to 100,000 people within an organization
Yeah.
that will inspire them to, make shifts in their life.
Well,
It's pretty ridiculous.
what's even more interesting, or even additionally, like, cool or scary about it is these, supercomputers are far better at sifting through, trillions of data points and finding patterns than we are as people. I
Of
mean, we
course.
have very, very fast processes in our mind. And in fact, there's lots of studies that talk about how the human mind processes so many pieces of information so instantaneously, it's hard to emulate that. But we're not that great at identifying patterns over the course of
Of
many
course.
Right. It's why people make the same mistakes over and over
So,
again. But it also speaks to like why wisdom is so hard to capture, because it really comes from recognizing patterns. So
let's
if these
go.
teachers are better at it, could we actually become more enlightened through these, digital clones
Of
than
course,
we as people could do by processing our own lives? I don't know.
it's an interesting question that I don't know the answer of, but I want to bring us back to wisdom.
Yeah.
Prompt engineering went from a job to a technical skill to a required skill. Hmm. It reminds me of something that my friend Anna Maria shared on LinkedIn one day, a graph that showed that there's two parts of the graph. The first about the graph is that um, it used to take you a short amount of time to learn a skill, but then you had a long amount of time to deploy the skill. Let's say it took you 4 years to learn woodworking. You had 50 years to be a woodworker.
Mm-hmm.
Well, now it's kind of shifted. It takes you now longer time to learn the skill than the amount of time you have to deploy the skill. Imagine in November 2022 or by May of 2023, prompt engineering is the new job that everybody wants. And so now there's all these 2-year
Yeah.
college programs that are doing prompt engineering degrees. Well,
Too
all of a
late.
sudden, prompt engineering is gone, or now it's just a skill that everybody needs.
Mm-hmm.
But there's still people who are still on a 2-year trajectory to learn the skill, which means the time it takes to learn the skill is longer than the time it takes you to actually utilize the skill. So the question is, so the second part of the graph, so that's the graph. So the question is, if if skills aren't, it's just the way the pace of the world is going. It's just we've reached the tipping point in those two graphs where from now on, it, learning skills will be a waste of time because
Well,
the skill. And so the question is there a set of behaviors where you don't look at upskilling people, you look at up behavioring people so that if they're armed with the right adaptability and learning resilience and agility, they can apply those behaviors to whatever skill is hot in the job market at the time. Do you see that?
yeah, I think that's already happening.
So
Where
what is that? So
well,
what are
so
some of those
those
behaviors?
are also skills. So
Yeah.
things like adaptability, resilience, and all those are soft skills. So hard skills are, do you know how to code in Python? That's a hard skill. Soft skill is, are you resilient? Do you learn quickly? Those are soft skills. And I think skills-based organizations and everybody is really moving in this direction because they realize the nature of jobs and titles and sets of tasks is changing so much that what you really need is clusters and sets of hard and soft skills applied to certain work that needs to get done. And that's a much more fluid
Mm-hmm.
environment. So this idea of fluidity is really important, because I think the skill sets of the future are going to be, the ones that are most valuable are ones that are about being able to prevail in a fluid environment. Meaning
And
not, I learned this skill and I do it
do you
for
have 4 or 5 that you're seeing on the job boards like um like empathy, conflict resolution, are there ones that keep popping out of like regardless of what the role is, these are the core perennial behaviors we expect you to have or soft skills?
Yeah, there are some that are becoming the most valuable, soft skills. They're not actually, it's interesting, every once like, sometimes you'll see these in job descriptions, but mostly it comes out during the hiring or performance evaluation process. It's not really something you write down easily. I think it's mostly because people aren't necessarily good at recognizing or sizing up their own soft skills. But adaptability is becoming incredibly, incredibly important.
Hmm.
Uh, and I think it's because of the environment in which we're operating is constantly changing, and so adaptability is becoming as valuable as gold. And not everybody has scores high in adaptability. Some people are like, listen, I want to do the thing I do and I want to do it that way forever and ever and ever. And that approach to work is becoming um very, very obsolete. And yet, if you look at how the makeup of the world is and archetypes and all that, there's a lot of workers out there who like to learn something once and then just do it over and over again
Of
because
course.
they find comfort in it. There are far fewer people who are very comfortable in ambiguous and fluid situations that are different every couple of days, right? Most people feel like there's a certain sense of chaos that makes them uncomfortable. Some people love that environment, and some people can just cope with it and adapt to it. So adaptability is really important because not everybody wants to create that kind of world of chaos. Some do, and we know we can name some who like to create chaos, right? But the people who can actually figure out how to adapt and prevail in an environment like that they don't necessarily control
Hmm.
are becoming incredibly valuable.
I,
There are
I, w-
human skills to collaboration, creating followership. Uh, Those are also becoming really important in leaders because they're trying to lead people through a whitewater rapids, not a calm pond that you're like sailing across. Now it's water rapids.
I, I
So,
had, um, I had a friend of mine, Francesco Pastore, on my podcast a few months ago. He's he's now in a new company, but at the time he was the chief commercial officer of a multi-billion-dollar company in Europe called Sofidel.
wow.
And what he says is learning agility, different ways of working, soft skills, the ability to have a future self narrative, see yourself in the future as part of the solution,
Hmm.
adaptability, and being a scanner, a multiple, a multi-potential, a multi-potentialite, like be able to have idea synthesis, rapid learning, and adaptability, to be able to look around and dot connect, right, and then synthesize, and then see
Hmm.
yourself as part of the future, and then learn different ways of working and be agile. He believes that that those who approach life with the humility of a student, and with the zeal of a better tomorrow, those are the ones. Those
Yeah.
are the only ones. Those are the only ones that will survive. Because if if you're too rigid
Yeah.
and in a fight or flight response, you flight, the world's going to leave you behind.
Yeah. So, and I think also communication skills, because you can have all of those other
Yeah,
attributes.
those soft skills.
Yeah,
Those
they're very
yeah.
internal, but you've got to also actually think language is becoming increasingly important, because that's the point I wanted to make about prompt engineering. Is in the beginning, I think people thought it was a technical skill, and that's why they wanted to build it into engineers and stuff first. But actually, good prompt engineering actually comes from mastery of language, mostly the English language at this point. You know, it language is nuanced, and if you can harness language really well, you probably are going to be better at getting out of an LLM, large language model, what you want.
Mhm.
And if you have like a rudimentary, eh, grasp on the English language or whatever language is going to prevail in these LLMs, you're not going to get the same result. So I would have said years ago, an English major, what are you going to do except for go to go to law school? It was like a big thing, or journalism or something like that, right? But now, mastery of language is going to become amazingly important. So, so I think it's now time for the next rise of the liberal arts studies, in my opinion.
I I have said that for 10 years since we started off as a bowl of pasta sauce around the dinner table on July 15th, 2015, that you will see a rise in acting degrees and arts degrees and all these kind of different things become leaders in corporate America. People
Mhm.
that used to be actors are now good leaders because they understand people and relation and collaboration and communication, those kinds of things.
Mhm.
So the people, it's unfortunate, and I wrote a whole Rolling Stone column about this, and it's backed by someone else's big essay, very well-researched essay, but we're living through the collapse of the knowledge economy. 1 billion knowledge workers, $1.7 trillion in student debt is about to be rendered obsolete. Those that built an entire career and identity on the proposition of knowing something,
Mhm.
it's fading away.
Yeah.
And so the question is, the bigger question, and this is going to be the closing question, but the bigger question will be, what if we've been playing the wrong game all along? What is the new game that needs to be played?
Well, I think it's already in motion, and we're like, we could literally be in the first quarter of the game we don't even know exists yet,
Yeah.
and we're unprepared for it. We don't understand how long it is. We don't know how much it's going to change, and I think that's living in a fluid world where what you wake up today can be entirely different to what you went to
Mhm.
bed with yesterday is a whole new reality.
Which is bringing me back to, does the world need more grounding, wise, elder people, metaphorical elder people, to ground people, to help them feel safe, emotionally regulated, like
Mhm.
whatever comes tomorrow is going to be different, but it's going to be all right?
Yeah,
That
I mean, I think
that's the original question.
people would be able to sleep at night who think about this stuff more if they felt like there were enough anchor points in the world that were based in wisdom and ethics, and a true actual sense of right and wrong, not a soundbite that was constantly keeping their hands on the pulse of just because we can, does that mean we should?
Mhm.
And we're not asking those questions now. The
Mm.
people that are actually executing on the yes, we can and we're going to do it because we can aren't asking if we should. They're pushing the boundaries of capability, but without bringing along, the
Mhm.
brother of
So
capability, which is
so
kind of
what's
so
so what's something small that our listeners can do to build that anchor point in their personal lives, teams' lives, communities' lives, something simple that you and I actually do all the time in community?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, I think one of the things that I am doing more consciously now is making decisions about how much of my personal information I'm willing to share digitally, because you cannot be sure about how this goes. And I think people have become very careless about what information they share. I mean, there's intimate levels of information about how you feel and what you think and what you celebrate and what you condemn and whatever, like out there now. It's just fuel for the army of people who say we're going to do this because we can. There is no army out there who is also standing up
Mm.
for we shouldn't do this
So
way because we
so
shouldn't. So
so step 1, be mindful of what you share. What's step 2 that someone today can do to create an anchor point in their life that emotionally regulates them, reminds them that wisdom is the way, and that we're human beings at the end of the day?
So I think that one of the key things that leads to that kind of mindfulness is to put the phone down and and talk to each other and like actually look each other in the eyes. And I know we joke about, the kids are at the dinner table and they're texting you, "Hey, can you get the milk?" And it's hilarious. It's not hilarious. We're losing human connection um rapidly. And even the current generation of young people don't have good ways to interact with each other in person, one on one. They're doing it digitally, which both makes you more bold, but also um, it hurts in different ways. That they're hurting each other in ways that are unintentional, but because you're interacting digitally, you just don't get that same like visceral reaction. The chemical emission that happens when somebody feels bad. I mean that there's actually a chemical that gets released that you can sense. Do you ever walk into a room and sense tension? Well, that's weird because tension doesn't have matter, but somehow if you're sensitive to those things and you can pick up on that, you can walk into a room and say, "Oh, I could cut the tension with a knife," even though all the words that are being said are fine and everybody's smiling. We're losing the ability to do that, which I think is the absolute core of sussing out what's right and wrong in
Mhm.
every minute or any every second or in every interaction or in a plan or whatever it is, and we're just losing it. And so I think putting the phone down is maybe a step everybody can take, uh, and spending time just human to human is really important.
I love it. You are a fan of hosting dinners.
Yes, I
What is
am.
that what does that give your people? What kind of hope, what kind of feeling does that give your people? What type of feeling do you hope to create around the dinner table?
We like to curate the people we bring to dinner parties. So we spend some time thinking about who would be good together, even though we have a lot of friends and a lot of people that we invite who don't necessarily know each other. Meaning we don't have one big clique of friends that is all like the neighborhood and stuff. Like if not for my husband and me, none of our friends would know each other because that's just how it is. And so we like to bring people together that we think have something to share with each other. It's interesting because our dinner parties, we just had one a couple of weeks ago, and we had people who were, 30 years old there. We had people in their 40s, we had people in their 60s and 70s, and so you wouldn't think, like, stretching across that many generations, backgrounds and stuff. We had a chef there, there was another CEO there. There was, somebody who was a runway model there. I mean, seriously diverse set of experiences. Firefighter. You're like, "What on earth would those people have in common?" And the reality is that the only real thing they have in common is their humanness and the fact that they're nice people and the fact that they typically the ones that we tend to gravitate to have good sense of humor, and that kind of thing. So that opportunity to interact with people that you aren't going to run into at work and maybe aren't in your own social circle, the only interaction you can have is on a human level because you can't really talk shop. And, I think that's why it's so fun, and I think I told you, Chris, I have these little conversation cards that I use, and I put them in the tablescape, just little piles of them just in case
Mhm.
this diverse group of people that doesn't know each other needs a little help in sparking conversation. I've tried all these different conversation decks, and there's lots of them out there, and some of 'em are weird, um, but the last one was a pretty good one. Uh, but they're just little conversation starters and stuff. This last dinner party we had, nobody needed the cards. In fact, it was so loud in my dining room. It was 12 people, so loud you were screaming at each other because everybody was talking across the table and down the table. And none of them came from each other's lives. They all were interacting with people that they only knew through us and maybe had met one other time and maybe not at all. It was amazing. I loved it.
Folks, you've just heard Julie, who has a great touch point on the labor market, on AI, on leadership, has had a tremendous amount of success, is well respected, is well liked, is well read, has been through a lot of adversity. The full package is saying to y'all that no matter where the world goes tomorrow and how that impacts you listening, whether that's impacting the business model of your company, your own job security, or where you're planning to study if you're a kid, what Julie's saying is turn off the phone, be mindful of what personal information you put out there, and gather a few people around the dinner table. Because the dinner table is truly the last thing that AI can get to. And if you just want to have an anchor point to ground you in a little wisdom, in story, in conversation, in curiosity, in the tension of the human experience, in the inconvenience of life, and the courage of just showing up and slowing down, being present, host a dinner.
I call that reclaiming your humanity.
Oh, reclaiming your humanity. Bam.
Yeah.
Good. Name of the title of the podcast episode, Reclaiming Your Humanity.
In the world of AI.
Now, this isn't Julie's not a person who's anti-AI.
No.
She's pro-AI and human. It's the and, not the or. And so if you're looking to not only use AI to speed up your progress, to do greater things, to have a positive impact, to clone yourself, to coach 1 million individuals at once, also reclaim your humanity, slow down just enough to remember what a beauty it is to be alive, and it'll create a greater symbiosis. There's a region in Italy that does this quite well, and it's the region of Emilia-Romagna. There's a road called the Via Emilia, an ancient Roman road that goes from just southeast of Milan and goes all the way out to the coast, diagonal southeast, out to Rimini on the Adriatic Sea. And there's a couple towns on that road, the Via Emilia, like Reggio Emilia, Parma, Modena, Bologna. Great towns. Now, that region is known for Parmigiano Reggiano, Prosciutto di Parma, balsamic vinegar di Modena. What do all those things, those foods have in common? They take a while to make. Parmigiano Reggiano takes up to 5 years to age. Balsamic vinegar takes 12 years minimum, 25 years premium minimum to make. It's the land of slow food. Hear that? Slow food. Well, it's also, that region, the home of Ferrari, De Tomaso, Ducati, Lamborghini, Pagani, some of the fastest cars in the world. Number 1 export region in Italy. It's the land of slow food and fast cars. You see that dialectic, folks? You see that tension, folks? Slow and fast, not slow or fast. So we closed out this episode encouraging you to reclaim your humanity and use AI to speed up your positive impact. Do both. Any last words in closing, Julie?
No, I just think, in the world of putting your phone down, it's not just so you can talk to the person across from you. It's also if you're standing at Lake Geneva and you're looking at the Alps, don't try and take a picture of it. Just look at it.
Just look at it. I'm in talks with Norway right now to do a reading party, kind of a slowed down moment for hundreds of people in the middle of a fjord,
Yeah.
so that people can become humble by the sheer size and beauty of a rock.
Yeah.
Right?
Thing. That's a real thing. That's part of
Um,
humanity is understanding your size and importance or not relative
well,
to
so
the universe.
my favorite book I read in 2022, which was Financial Times Book of the Year in 2021, was called 4,000 Weeks: Time Management for Mortals by Oliver Berkman, which is not like a self-help or a time management book on how to optimize your time. It's a book to say life is absurdly brief, and why don't you reimagine your relationship with time? And one of the chapters is called Cosmic Insignificance Therapy. And it's the idea that we meditate on how small and insignificant and finite our little speck of existence is. And when you meditate on that, you realize, in the grand scheme of things, I don't mean that much, which means I probably shouldn't beat up my entire life to go out and do all these things, because it's probably not going to be remembered. So why don't I just invite those people over for dinner? What could be more important than that?
Yep. Couldn't
All
agree
right,
more.
folks. We covered a lot of ground in this episode. We went from AI. I hope you got a base layer of AI. Yes, I know that, some of y'all are maybe just beginning your AI journey, and so we brought it to you in a very appetitable way. But for those of you who are a little bit more developed on the AI journey, I hope you got a remembrance of the reclaiming your humanity side. Some of y'all probably already have more agentic employees than human employees. You're probably 10 years into it by now. I hope you remember that at the end of the day, being human is one of the greatest gifts our planet has ever seen. And let's not squander it away. Let's invent systems and solutions and products and services that help people be more human. If you enjoy this episode and you're new to our podcast, click that subscribe button. Join us along for this journey. You see, we love to have some wild conversations. Go back a couple episodes and check out Julie Peck's episode number 1, The Gift of a Curvy Path. To all our loyal listeners, thanks for tuning in. Next time you're in New York City, give us a call. You're welcome to our dinner table anytime you'd like. If we were in person, I'd give you a big old hug and help you remember what it is to be alive. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Join us for the journey. Hope you're having a phenomenal day on Earth. Remember, folks, it's your world. Go explore. I'll see you next episode.